Welcome back, everybody. John Aravosis here. Wednesday, November 20th, Aravosis Report. Coming to you live from DC. Let me get TikTok, which actually I've already got TikTok ready to go. I think it'll just work. Let's find out. Yes. Oh, live goal. I'm already forgetting. Forgetting my live goal. Oh, boy. 1 second here. Feel free to introduce yourselves while I do this. I do like that crown. I think the crown is fun. All right, go live. There we go. All right. 1 second. We're going to flip my camera on TikTok. There we go. All right. Woo-woo. Woo-woo. Good evening, everybody. Hello, YouTube or TikTokers. YouTubers already. TikTokers are joining us now. Here's the TikTokers. Welcome, guys. How's everybody doing? Andre. TikTokers. Richard sending gifts already. Thank you, Richard. Hey, Amanda. Russell. Who else we got here? Danielle in Quebec. Anyway, what's going on, guys? Welcome. As always, we'll talk about the latest from Ukraine. A little bit of, well, there isn't too much Trump news today, actually, shockingly. Thank you, Kathy. A little bit of Trump news today. Thank you, Kathy, for the gifts. Russell as well. Yeah, so how's everybody doing today? It's, what is it, Wednesday? It's not Thursday, it's Wednesday. All right. Hey, Diana. Hey, Oculto in Serbia. Kumacho and Mark, thank you for the gifts. Cool. Any news on the embassy threats? Yeah. Again, it's probably Russia being just idiots, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Thank you, Jay. We'll talk about that in a minute, though. Hey! And we're doing it again. God. Who knows what she's whining about this time? Hey, KT, thank you. Running Carol. Hey! Of course, we're going to have fun tonight. It's supposed to rain later, and the dog will be a disaster once that happens. Thank you, Camacho. That's a guarantee. Michael got a new job. Congrats, Michael. Hey, Christina and Carol and Doug with the gifts. Thank you. Jillian in the UK, subscriber over on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. Exactly. Arvanitas, exactly. Who is winning? It's a tie. Russia's doing a little better, but it's a tie. They're both kind of stuck. Is it chilly in DC? It's finally getting chilly in DC tonight. What is it, 60 degrees now, but there's a cold front coming through. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you, Cheryl. Cold front coming through, which will make it rainy and colder, unfortunately. So for now, we are losing our nice weather, unfortunately. So we're going to be down in the 50s during the day, kind of rainy, kind of nasty European weather. There is nothing that would trigger Russia to escalate things to a nuclear confrontation. No. I mean, a nuclear confrontation would trigger Russia to a nuclear confrontation. The thing you've got to remember with Russia, thank you, Cheryl, is the Russian government bullshits a lot. They excel at psychological terror. That's it. The Russian government is all about scaring you. That's what they do. So all these threats, we're going to talk about it today, but all of their ongoing threats. Guys, anybody who's not new to the show knows what I'm talking about. We've been talking about nuclear war for 3 years. I kid you not. 3 times a week, there have been Russian officials threatening nuclear war. 3 times a week for 3 years. I mean, guys, apply this to your own life. There's a bully that lives down the block. And for 3 years, 3 times a week, the bully threatens to hurt you. And it's literally like clockwork. 3 times a week. After the first year, you're probably going, I'm thinking this bully is kind of full of it. After the second year, you're really thinking the bully's full of it. After 3 years of a bully threatening to hurt you 3 times a week for 3 years, right? 1,000 times, you kind of go, that guy's full of shit. He's a bluffer. That's what Russia is. Russia's full of shit. They're bluffing. They can do damage to Ukraine, of course. But all of this nuclear war stuff, again, is Russia going to win a nuclear war? No. right? Nobody wins nuclear war. Everybody dies. So why would Russia have a nuclear war? Because they're crazy. They're not crazy. They're not crazy. Putin wants you to think he's crazy. Because then if you think he's crazy, you'd think, oh my God, he could do anything. That's what Putin wants you to think. It's all psychological terror. It's all psychological games from Putin because he can't win against us. We are bigger and stronger than them, and they know it. Our military is so much, but we spend 10 times collectively, us, the allies, 10 times as much on our military as he spends on his. Our troops are so much better than the Russian troops. Our weapons are so much better than the Russian weapons. We have so many more weapons than the Russians. We would bury them, to coin a phrase. Yes, Theo. We would bury them, and they know it. But what the Russians are very good at is bluffing and threatening. Putin's very, very good at it. Very good at it. Thank you, Joy, for the gift. And we're going to talk about there are more threats from them today. I mean, again, it's kind of like the old joke, those who can't do threaten. You know what I mean? I mean, the person who threatens the most, I'm going to get you, I'm going to get you, I'm going to get you. You better be careful. You better be scared of me. Usually is the person that you really don't need to be scared of because they're weak and they know it. And it's the weakness that makes them act out and scream all the time. So thank you. Who is this? Karma for the rose. All right. Let's get rolling. Today is day 1001 of Vladimir Putin's special 3-day military operation in Ukraine. Ukraine attacked what appeared to be a very high-value target, a very important target in Russia today, using British cruise missiles. Thank you, Kim. Now, it should be pointed out that the media is reporting that this is the media is saying this is the first case of the Ukrainians. Thank you, Norway, for the gift of the Ukrainians using British cruise missiles inside Russia to attack a target in Russia. That's not really accurate. This is the first known case of a Ukrainian cruise missile, I should say a British cruise missile being used inside Russia. It is widely expected that it already happened before. The Ukrainians have done it before. Thank you, Martini. Which goes to, by the way, Ukraine has used their cruise missiles inside Russia already. Thank you, Anne, in the last couple of months. What did Russia do in response? Right? Think about it. I mean, all the talk of Russia in the last day, oh my God, if you fire inside Russia, we're going to go crazy. Oh my God. The Ukrainians have been doing it for months. We just haven't been talking about it, but it's considered a fact that the Ukrainians have been using British weapons inside Russia for months now. Russia hasn't done anything, right? So anyway, Ukraine went after what is considered a high-value target. High-value target in military terms means really good target. Thank you, Christina. We don't know what it was. We know it was in the Kursk region, which is that Russian region right across the border that Ukraine's occupying some land in. Thank you, Heidi, for the gift. The target blew up like 10 times. It looks like the Ukrainians used British cruise missiles. It looks like they used 10 or 12 of them, which is a lot because they don't have that many. The fact that they would use 10 or 12 missiles on one target means it must have been a really important target, right? That's what they mean by high-value target. The speculation was this could have been a military headquarters where they had Russian generals and North Korean generals who were plotting the war strategy in the area there. We don't know. I don't know if we will know. I mean, part of it is our intelligence services finding out. Will we be able to find out what they hit? Secondly, is it in our best interest to go public? Because sometimes we find out things. Thank you, John S. Our intelligence will find something out, but we found it out because we've got a spy inside. Thank you, Norway Fox, for subscribing. And therefore, we may not go public on what we know because we don't want to out the spy. In any case, it is very likely that the Ukrainians hit something big today in Russia. I see this is pretty good. Where was Christopher is saying, wait until they strike back. Christopher, we've been waiting 3 years for the Russians to strike back. 3 years the Russians have been threatening to strike back. Why haven't they? Thank you, aviation. Why haven't they? Right? Now, Russia's been attacking Ukraine. Thank you, Bowie. And they've been committing crimes against humanity. We know that, right? Putin's been indicted for war crimes, for kidnapping Ukrainian children. The Russians have routinely murdered Ukrainian civilians. Thank you, Flower Lady, on purpose. We know that. But this is, again, part of the problem, Mike. First of all, Russia's been threatening for 3 years. Oh, you wait till they fight back. Dude, it's been 3 years. They haven't fought back yet. Why? Because they're not gonna, because they can't. Now, that doesn't mean Russia's not going to throw bombs at Ukraine. They've been doing that for 3 years. They're going to keep throwing bombs at Ukraine. We know that. And tonight, probably especially. It's some of the analysts are thinking that tonight the Russians may hit Ukraine with a lot of missiles, just to be especially obnoxious, because they're pissed off at America and Britain, the weapons being used inside Russia. So that's possible. Is this the first time Russia has hit the Ukrainians with lots of missiles and lots of drones? No. That's the problem. Is I want you to, every time in the future, I want you to think about this, okay? Every time you listen to these trolls who tell you, these Russia sympathizers, who tell you, oh my God, you just wait. Look what's going to happen now. Russia's going to get you. You need to ask them, why hasn't Russia gotten us once in 3 years? Because they bluff. They bluff. So anyway, so a little bit more here. The U.S. Embassy, Greek Embassy, Italian, Spanish, all shut down in Kyiv for the night. Thank you, Helene, for subscribing. Because of a credible threat of an air attack. Basically, the concern was that we got some intelligence that the Russians were threatening to blow up our embassies. Now, nobody thinks the Russians are going to do that because that would be an act of war. Then again, they like to do childish things. They like to do, like cutting the cables in the communications cables, right? They like to do childish things. Would the Russians accidentally hit our embassy? Probably. I mean, they might try. See, here's the thing you got to remember about Russia, okay? Because again, they're acting from a position of weakness, okay? They're a weak country. Mind you, guys, as we said, we're day 1001 of a war that Putin said was going to take 3 days, okay? Big old Russia hasn't been able to crush little old Ukraine in 1001 days, okay? So Russia's very weak. That's what you got to start with remembering. What they will do, and they have been doing, they like to attack us in ways that are obnoxious, thank you, Succeed, but are just short of declarations of war. Russia will not do anything. Thank you, Lolitu, for subscribing. Thank you, Jen, for the gift. Keep the gifts coming, guys. Russia will not do anything that will risk war with us. They will, however, do lots of things that are just shy of war. They'll do obnoxious things, like they've been actually trying to harm our soldiers, right? Frankly, they're probably, I wouldn't be surprised if the Russians are behind all the electronic, like the subsonic kind of attacks that are happening against our embassy employees. Thank you, Ticker, for the gift. I wouldn't be surprised if Russia's behind that. Thank you, Ryan. But think about it. The things that Russia does are always things when they attack us. Thank you, Geek Dork. They're always things that just aren't obnoxious enough to trigger a war. They're obnoxious enough to be obnoxious. They're obnoxious enough to be outrageous. They're obnoxious enough to be acts of war almost, right? But they're not quite enough of an act of war that we would go to war. That's the thing. Thank you, Bowie. Thank you, Nikolai. Thank you, Bowie. Again. So that's the thing. So that, like the embassy thing, I actually think Russia could attack our embassy. Because first of all, they do it at night. They do it when nobody was there. Oh, it was a mistake. Oh, it was the Ukrainians, right? They would do something obnoxious, and they know that Biden isn't going to declare war because they bombed our embassy. Again, it would be a total act of war. It would be totally illegal, a violation of international law. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Danny. But Russia knows we're not going to war if they bomb our embassy. We're going to be upset about it, but we're not going to go to war. That's the thing. Russia is I always say the only person more terrified of going to war with NATO, of Russia and NATO going to war than us, is Vladimir Putin. Why can't we all get along? Eterna, we can't all get along because they're very bad people. Unfortunately, some governments in the world are evil. The North Korean government is evil. It is a brutal, horrific dictatorship. The Russian government, pretty bad. Under indictment from the International Criminal Court for war crimes. Pretty freaking bad. The precursor government of the Soviet Union, definitely evil. You know? So that's why you can't have peace. World War II. It would have been nice if we could have had peace and not gone to World War II. The problem is World War II happened because there was an evil government, a couple of them actually, but one in particular in Germany that wouldn't stop. Sometimes bad men take over good countries. Sound familiar? You know? Iran's a perfect example too. Yeah. You know, you shouldn't be scared at all, Christian. You really shouldn't be. I mean, for all I would also, why be scared of what? That Putin made another threat in the last day when he's been making 3 threats a week for 3 years? Who cares? Thank you, adventurers. I mean, seriously, who cares? By the way, I think part of it too is like, I grew up during the Cold War. I grew up listening to the Russians do this bullshit every day. Every day, you know, Khrushchev, we will bury you. I wasn't alive then. I was alive like right after. Actually, 2 years after Khrushchev did the "we'll bury you" thing. But the Russians loved to threaten us with the nukes and blah, 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 blah. And if you lived during that era, most of it, you're sort of pretty used to the bullshit. You know, you're pretty used to it. Anyway. All right. A little bit more here. Former British Defense Minister Tobias Ellwood talked more about Russia's threats to retaliate. I thought this was interesting via Sky News. Listen to this. Were Putin to use a nuclear weapon, he would immediately alienate his 2 biggest security allies, India and China. They would distance themselves from Russia, and that would affect Putin's economy. It would also go down badly in Russia. There would also be retaliation by the West, particularly the US and the UK. I have no doubt that every F-35 fighter jet would then be launched to take out Russian assets in Ukraine. The consequences would be huge. That is a really important point. The only way we go to war with Russia, thank you, Nikolai, or Nicola. Nikolai, I'm calling you. That would be Nicola instead, Patini. The only way that we go to war with Russia is if the West doesn't make clear that we are willing to go to war with Russia if they force us to, right? We do not want war. But you get war when you come across as weak. You get war when you telegraph to the bad guy that we're so scared of you. Oh my God, we're so scared of you. We're so scared of war with you. We'll do anything to stop, right? Then he says, well, if you'll do anything to avoid going to war with me, then I'm going to ask you to do anything, right? I'm going to demand land. I'm going to demand you give me half of Ukraine, right? On and on and on, right? You get war because bad guys look at you and think you're weak. Bad guys look at you and think, if I were to invade Europe, if I were to invade Poland, if I were to invade Lithuania, Trump wouldn't really do anything. You know, he wouldn't really defend them. If that's Putin's analysis, that makes Putin much more likely to invade. If China looks at Taiwan and says, well, I think Trump or Biden or whoever is afraid of going to war with me or thinks it isn't worth it. If I'm China and I think, hey, America doesn't have the heart to go to war over Taiwan, I'm much more likely to go to war over Taiwan if I'm China. Because I think the Americans won't get involved, because every country has to do an analysis, a calculus, where they say, okay, you know, if I do X, what will the other countries do, right? Especially going to war. If I go to war and invade you or whatever, my neighbor, what will the cost of it? Because it's called cost benefit, literally. What will the cost of it be to me? And cost doesn't mean money. Cost means everything, to my budget, to my human beings, my soldiers, to my economy. What will the cost to me be? And part of that analysis of the cost is, if I go to war, who else will go to war against me? In China's case, invading Taiwan. Will America go to war against me or not? If you think America won't go to war against China over Taiwan, then if you're China, you're going, this is getting a lot more interesting. Same thing with Russia. The more the Russians think that we're afraid of them, the more likely they will do things that should make us afraid, right? If they fear us, it will keep them at bay. So, do I think America will go to war within the next 5 years? Not necessarily with Russia, but possibly with China, unfortunately. There's a lot of talk about China and Taiwan, and Trump. The problem is Trump's a wild card with all of that. Hope not, but, Why with China, Lucy? Because the big discussion has been that China wants to get Taiwan back. Taiwan is an independent country. Chinese don't like it. There's a lot of history here. I mean, it goes back to the Chinese. It goes back to the communist revolution in the 1940s, all sorts of stuff. But the Chinese don't like it. Chinese want Taiwan back. They want to make it part of China. They believe it is part of China, and they've been threatening to go to war to do it, to invade. It's an island right off of China, a country right off of China. They've been threatening to invade to do it. The only thing there's two things stopping them from invading. Well, really one main thing stopping them from invading: the U.S. China knows that right now they can't afford to invade Taiwan because the Americas will go to war and China will lose. The thinking is in 4 years, China will have a strong enough military that it can credibly threaten the U.S. by invading Taiwan. Now, from the U.S. perspective, we still think our war games, our Pentagon people say they still think we will win the war against China, but it will be a very bloody war, a very bad war. So we don't want that. But there is real concern about whether China will start a war in the next 4 to 5 years. So that's the issue with China. That's why we're talking about it. So anyway, let me see a little more here. President Biden approved the use of American anti-personnel landmines in Ukraine, a U.S. official told Reuters. The U.S. has provided Ukraine with anti-tank mines throughout the war, but the addition of anti-personnel mines, thank you, Danan, is a change. The move could help slow Russian advances in the east of the country or help Ukraine defend the territory it has occupied in Kursk. According to reports, the U.S. expects Ukraine to use the mines in its own territory, and it is committed not to use them in areas populated by civilians. So the idea is we've given the Ukrainians mines before that are anti-tank mines used for blowing up tanks, but we haven't given them weapons yet, but we are now. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Danik. We are giving them weapons that are basically mines against soldiers. So you can put them in the ground to stop soldiers from invading further. So this would be basically a way of stopping the Russians from invading and invading even further into Ukraine. Thank you, Danan. Thank you, Nicola. Yep. Oh, I didn't see somebody being evil, Poppy. All right. Yeah. Report and then obviously block as well. What else we got here? What else we got? Calderon. I don't know what you're talking about, but you're spamming, and if you say that one more time, you're going to get muted. You are getting muted now. Bye. Mods, give Calderon a little cooling off. Also because he's not making any sense, but he's also clearly spamming. Thank you, Danan. Thank you, Mikey Tushons. Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Hey, Doc, my hair looks good. Thank you. All right, let's keep going here. Keep the gifts coming, guys. Remember, I do this full time. I do it for free. So your gifts pay the bills. Thank you, Rune. Thank you, Randy. Censoring people. Oh, Kyle, we censor people all the time. Are you kidding? Seriously? What do you think this is? Is this the Kyle show? Is this the Kyle report? I do not think so. This is the Aravosis report. Thank you, Colin. We censor people all the time. Thank you, Dora. Anybody who comes here to cause trouble gets censored. Absolutely. And by the way, this is common on the internet. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Danan. Thank you, Pascal. People get kicked off all the time of different websites they're on if they're being obnoxious. Thank you, Hedge. It's the only way to keep the conversation normal. I mean, I'm using Kyle's word censorship. I got news for you. The internet isn't free. And the internet isn't like a free space. If people are obnoxious and they come to harass you, we will protect you from people coming to harass you. So yes, we will. So get used to it. F-16s. The Netherlands handed the final 2 of 18 promised F-16s to a training facility in Romania for the Ukrainians. The training facility is training the Ukrainians on using the F-16s, so they're not really going to war right away. They're being used to train the Ukrainians, but still, the Netherlands has come through in a big way. Thank you, Carol, for the gift. That's 18 F-16s that the Netherlands have already given the Ukrainians, which is pretty amazing, actually. Syndicate's house. It is Syndicate's house as well. It's the house that Syndicate built, by the way. Syndicate is responsible for building, for building our Discord, especially. Very important. Thank you, Nicola, for the gift. What else we got here? Biden has submitted to Congress a statement of intent to cancel half of Ukraine's economic aid, a sum of around $4.5 million. That's a big deal. Trump has named Matthew Whitaker as the next U.S. ambassador to NATO. Whitaker served briefly as acting U.S. Attorney General during Trump's first term and has no experience in national security, diplomacy, or foreign policy. What a surprise! Trump is picking somebody as the ambassador to NATO who knows nothing about NATO. The U.S. has announced $275 million more in military aid to Ukraine, including ammunition for the HIMARS, artillery shells, Javelin surface-to-air missiles as well. And finally, more evidence of the Russian economy having problems. Russian car maker CEO the CVO is Maxim Sokolov. The car maker is Avtovaz, I guess. Thank you, Mrs. Toad. Thank you, Shah. I got your box sent out today, Mrs. Toad. So hopefully you will see it soon. Thank you, Shah, for the gift. The Russian car maker forecasts a 30% collapse in the Russian car market in 2025. Thank you, Disco. Thank you, Shah. Sales of new cars and light commercial vehicles in Russia could decline by 21 to 30% in 2025 if high interest rates persist. Russian interest rates are somewhere around 21% right now, I believe. Ours are, what did we say? I keep forgetting this. I was asking the other day. Ours are around 4.5 or 5.5%, something like that. The Russian interest rates are up to 21%. So imagine having a loan and the interest on your loan is 21%. So not good. All right, that is it for the news today. There isn't a ton of news today, actually. Thank you, Helly-Ann. Thank you, Jeff. We will now do basically this is the part of the show where we hang out, we talk. I've got a lot of cool auction items. I'll only show you a couple. I'll show you more later, but we auction off really cool stuff that I get from Ukraine. Thank you, Jorge, for the gifts. Lots of gifts from Jorge. Thank you for that. We auction off a lot of cool stuff from Ukraine over at our Discord community. Half of the proceeds from the auctions go to Ukraine. Half of it goes to support my work because I do the show for free. I've been doing this for free since the war started. Actually, it's almost 3 years now. Starting in March, it'll be 3 years. I will show you a couple of the things we're auctioning. I'm not going to show you all of them right now necessarily, but probably the coolest thing we've got is a Russian drone. A Russian drone from Ukraine. Thank you, Ron, that we got our hands on, that we are auctioning off. Very cool. It was shot down by Ukrainian troops. Not shot down. It was brought down by Ukrainian troops with a fishing net. They basically used nets to bring down the Russian drones. And they strung the net up, brought down 2 drones. We've got 2 of them from Ukraine. Vlad thinks they're from Vuhledar. The soldiers reached out to our friend Vlad, who's also Ukrainian, and asked us if we would try to auction them off to basically help the Ukrainian military. So thank you, Mikey. So we've got 2 of the drones. Very cool stuff. Thank you, PR, for following. So that's very cool. A number of other cool things. This actually is pretty neat too. This is, it's called trench art. We call this more generally. This was an old container that was used to house a grenade, a hand grenade. It still says hand grenade on it. It's just a cardboard container. But what a Ukrainian artist did was he painted it gold, I believe he, wrote the Ukrainian trident on it, and then wrote on the bottom, strength and unity, signed it on the bottom, and signed the town Kharkiv as well, where he's from. But a really neat piece. Obviously, it stands up on its own, but this was a grenade case that now is art from the Ukrainian war front, which I think is very cool. Couple more pieces. Actually, I won't show you too much today. One of the other cool pieces I've got is a White House Christmas ornament 2024 dedicated to the Jimmy Carter. And this is the 2024 White House Christmas ornament. We went by the White House Historical Association last weekend. They've got, they're right across the street from the White House. And it is an ornament dedicated to Jimmy Carter. It has an anchor because he was a sailor. The White House, the back of it's kind of neat too, because the back is different. Oops. You can see that, the years he was in the White House, the name of his or the number of his submarine. But this is the official White House Christmas ornament of 2024. So that is up for auction as well. I do see Daniel. We're going to get to that in a second, Sin. The other thing I will show you, and then I'll skip for now. We've got a lot of other stuff. I'll show you more later. One second here. So the other thing I'll show you right now, which is pretty cool, is we also have a knockoff Lego set from Ukraine that is a Lego, but it's not a Lego. It's a knockoff from Ukraine for making a HIMARS and a Bayraktar. The HIMARS is the rocket system causing so much trouble for the Russians. The Bayraktar is that Turkish drone the Ukrainians were using so effectively that we all kind of fundraised for in various countries. It's a Lego set. What is particularly cool about the Lego set, it is obviously devoted to Ukraine, Ukrainian, flags, Ukraine in the corner. ZSU at the top, the dog tags means Ukrainian army, but what is it? Armed Forces of Ukraine, it means in Ukrainian. What is particularly cool about this kit honoring the Ukrainian military that's fighting Russia, this kit is made in Hong Kong. The Chinese are creating toys for the Ukrainians, honoring the Western weapons that are being used to get the Russians. The Chinese, who are the Russians' allies. Is that absolutely insane? I mean, absolutely. Anyway, so this comes from Ukraine, which is cool anyway. And it's a cool box. The box itself is pretty freaking cool, but it's made in Hong Kong, which is the best freaking part. So, hey, who is that? Oh, hey, Despise. So we've got lots of other auction items. Go check it out. You can, money rules, exactly, Jason. I just think it's hilarious. I mean, the Chinese are this is worth, I need to contact some reporters actually, because this is like a New York Times article. Like, why are there Chinese companies making war toys to basically boost Ukrainian morale in attacking the Russians? I mean, it's very capitalistic for a communist country, to be honest. It's the kind of thing we would do. You know what I mean? Like, it's the kind of thing Trump would do. The kind of thing like a pure capitalist would do. You know what I mean? It's very funny. Anyway, the Chinese will build anything. In any case, so yeah, like I said, we've got lots of cool auction items. There's more than that. We've got a really cool, all right, last little thing. Also a very cool piece of Ukrainian folk art. This is a motanka. It is basically like a doll. Now this one is affixed to a canvas, but it's a doll the Ukrainians make that going back years ago, they believe harnesses the spirits of the ancestors to protect your home. And it's kind of complicated. I think it's almost the concept of over the years, families live in the same home and so many people have died there that you could have like bad spirits or something. And the motanka is a doll they make. She never has a face. She always has like a cross or a crisscross as a face. And they put her in the home to protect you. Vlad was saying, my friend Vlad, who got us this, that his wife actually made one and put it in their baby's crib when their daughter was born. Like the Ukrainians still do this as part of like a superstition, it's a custom and a superstition. So anyway, this is a really neat little motanka picture frame that from Ukrainian handicraft. All right. All of these you can find over at Discord. Our Discord community is easy to reach on YouTube. Just go to the description of today's show. Should be there. On TikTok, go to my profile. Look for the Linktree link. Click the link. Now, if you're on a computer, you can just click Discord, because when you click the link on my profile on TikTok, it brings up a list of links, including Discord. Computer, just click Discord. If you're on a phone, it probably won't work if you click the Discord link. On a phone, you have to press and hold the Discord link. And then, thank you, Christina. Thank you, Fred, for the gift. If you press and hold the Discord link for a second, then you'll see a thing opening up that says accept invite. Then you can click it and you're fine. But go check it out. The auctions go until next Tuesday. I think we've already got a lot of bids because this is a pretty cool week of stuff. I've got a lot of cool stuff over the next several weeks. I was trying to get like interesting Christmassy things for somebody at least who's military minded. Thank you, Nicolate. Thank you, Daniel. Nicolate again, more gifts. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Randy. Now, Danielle, good to see you. Daniel is here. Have you heard of the term crinks? No. Oh, thank you, Annie. That was kind of cool for just a hamster. That was cute. Thank you. Have you heard of the term crinks? China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. Interesting. Do you think Trump's administration will be compelled to see Russia as being anti-American? Let me work on this. Thank you, Chazak. Do you think Trump's administration will be compelled to see Russia as anti-American, given their history, threats, and the bad company they keep? Trump is very interesting. Now, Trump acts like he's compromised by Russia, according to Trump's own national security advisor. Trump's director of national intelligence, I should say. Trump's director of national intelligence last time said he was concerned that Trump was co-opted by the Russians, or basically being blackmailed by the Russians or something. He was compromised by the Russians, he said. Couldn't find any evidence. This is Dan Coates. You can Google it. Dan Coates, very conservative Republican, Christian right congressman, senator actually, said he thought Trump was compromised. Interestingly, Trump was, during his administration, he was forced to, even though he tried to suck up to Putin, right? Like, remember the crazy summit in Helsinki when Trump just went crazy in supporting Putin and everybody thought he lost his mind. But Trump was forced to help Ukraine. He was forced to give Ukraine weapons, right? So he ended up, this was actually very funny. There's a funny story about Trump having kicked out like 200 Russian diplomats or something after the Russians either tried, I'm forgetting which one this was. They either tried to kill or they killed. I think, was this the Skripal one where the Russians the Russians go into Europe. Thank you, Digits. Thank you, Randy. The Russians go into Europe and they kill dissidents. They kill Russians who have escaped to the West. And they went and tried to kill a man and I think his daughter in the UK. Thank you, Jonathan, if I'm not mixing my stories up here. And using chemical weapons, basically. And Europe, I mean, the Brits were incensed. Europeans were incensed because you just don't go into other countries and assassinate people. The Russians do, but you're not supposed to. Thank you, Jonathan. And apparently what happened here was Trump's people went to him and said, what did they say? The Europeans are kicking out like 200 diplomats. We'd like to kick out 200 diplomats. And Trump, what I'm trying to think of how this way. I'm trying to think of how this goes. Trump understood them, he claims. Now, Trump's a liar, mind you, so who knows, right? Thank you, Sweet Talker. Thank you, Super Hornet and Kathy. But Trump claims he thought they said, we'd like to kick out 200 diplomats total, including the European and the American, the Russians in Europe and America. We'd like to kick out 200 total. In other words, America might kick out 50 and Europe kicks out 150 or something. What they actually said to Trump was, we'd like to kick out 200 Russian diplomats from America. So Trump did, which was a really big affront to Putin. The thing is, Trump could find himself in a situation where he doesn't have a choice. Even on Ukraine, think about it. Trump's been very careful. Even though Trump's been awful, he's also been very careful. He's trying to argue, for example, he doesn't want to give any more aid to Ukraine. Thank you, Danan. But he also doesn't want to look like he's helping Russia. And he keeps saying, well, if the Russians say that they're not going to negotiate, I'll give more aid to Ukraine, Trump said, right? Thank you, Jetta. Thank you, Danan. So Trump seems to be in this situation where he doesn't want to help Ukraine. He wants to help Russia, but he also is somewhat afraid that he can only be so pro-Russian to the American public. So I don't know. I think Putin may not be able to help himself. Putin is not going to be, a good guy, right? Putin is thank you, RTR. Thank you, Bryce, for the gifts. I think Putin may force Trump's hand by continuing to be evil and doing bad things in Ukraine when Trump wants a ceasefire and Putin keeps breaking it. It could put Trump in a weird, not to mention, keep in mind, by the way, Putin went after Trump's wife. Number 3, the current wife, not the previous 2 wives that he cheated on. The third wife who he cheated on. Putin went after Melania right after Trump was elected. Thank you, Wanda. Right after Trump was elected. So a week ago, 2 weeks ago, the Russian media does a show, their big nightly talk show. And they decide to do a segment about Melania. Oh, look who's going to be back as America's first lady. And they spend 3 minutes showing naked pictures of Melania. Now, Melania was a model. There are nude pictures of her. The pictures, there's also some rather salacious nude pictures, like of her with another woman. I mean, they're very salacious, okay? Very sexual. The Russians showed the nude pictures of Melania on TV to make fun of her right after Trump was elected. That was Putin's way of trying to like nudge and poke Donald Trump. Now, in the end, it depends what Trump's deal is with Putin, right? But it is quite possible that Trump wasn't very happy about what Putin did. Melania certainly wasn't happy, but it's quite possible that Trump wasn't happy either. So it's who knows how Trump will be with Russia. Again, his instinct is to suck up to Russia and give them what they want, but reality sometimes has a way of biting him in the ass, I think. Thank you, Wander Karma. Anyway, what else we got, guys? What else we got? I think it's good that Russia's not on the news. Nobody cares, Marion. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Nicholas. Marion saying, why isn't Russia on the news? Putin's warning the U.S. of war. It's because Russia's been threatening war for 3 years now. And I'm being quite serious. If you've been following the issue, 3 times a week, thank you, Mandy, Nicola, and Christina for the gifts. 3 times a week, the Russians threaten us with nuclear war. 3 times a week for 3 years. It's just not news anymore. I do, Luna. Luna says, why don't you ask for donations on Venmo or Cash App like other creators? I am happy. I've got links for Cash App and Venmo in my profile. If people want to give donations to support my work, God bless you. Feel free. I think my problem is maybe I don't ask for enough gifts, and I certainly don't ask for money directly nearly enough because I don't like asking for it. But I would appreciate it because I do this full time. So your guys' gifts and your donations are my income. But thank you for that. Thank you, KT, for the chicken. Anyway. But yes, I do have Venmo and Cash App. Yep. Thank you, RTR. Some Russians protested the invasion, which was very good. They've all been thrown in jail or kicked out of the country now, unfortunately, or they're terrified. Unfortunately. Thank you, Theo. Digits. Trotsky. I thought it said Trotsky. You're welcome, Rory. What else we got, guys? Thank you, Ida. Thank you, Wood. Oh, I always like the Elvis. I do try to be pleasant, Sasha. I am not always pleasant, I will admit. I try to be. I think I try to think about it. I almost try to when I do the show sometimes. Thank you, Gabs and Marsha. I almost try to think of 2 things. One, Rachel Maddow. 3 things. Rachel Maddow. Rachel is very smart, but I think Rachel is good at not getting angry. Like I get angry. Rachel does not get angry, right? The other 2 things I try to think of, I kid you not, are Ellen DeGeneres and Rosie O'Donnell, both of whom can be very difficult personalities in person. I love Rosie. I interviewed Rosie on my podcast. Rosie is brilliant, amazing woman. But on their shows, they were like the queen of nice on their shows, and they tried to be positive on their shows. And I try to, it's hard, but I try to sort of think of this show. And it's difficult because, as I said, I'm not always a very positive person. So for me, it can be difficult to keep things positive, but I think it's more fun. Even if we're talking about serious stuff, it's more enjoyable if we're not like everything is dying and horrible and war and every day feeling like the sky is falling. I think just who wants that, you know? Thank you, Marsha. Even if the sky's falling a little bit sometimes a little bit. Thank you, Marsha. Putin is still bluffing straight. Yep. I'm happy to talk about it. Thank you, RTR. Thank you, Trotsky. So the question was, Putin changed the nuclear policy. Do you still think he's bluffing? Yeah. So the Russians want you to believe. And I mean, think about that. And again, you guys know more than enough about Vladimir Putin. You know who he is. You know the power he has in Russia, right? You all know. Vladimir Putin wants you to believe that up until 2 days ago, he didn't have the power to use nuclear weapons to defend Russia and attack America. But now that Parliament or whoever has changed official Russian policy, Putin now has the ability to use nuclear weapons that he didn't have 3 days ago? Really? Who exactly in Russia was going to sit there when Putin says use the nuclear weapons? Who exactly in Russia was going to sit there and go, "Niet, no, we will not let you use nuclear weapons," right? Who would have done that in Russia to Putin? They would have had their head cut off. Thank you, Jane, right? I mean, it's bullshit. I mean, again, we're to believe Vladimir Putin didn't have the power to use nuclear weapons up until 2 days ago, and now suddenly he does? Really? I mean, really? Thank you, Regard. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. China and the Philippine ships. I haven't seen what they've done lately, Fanatic. I do know that China has been harassing the Philippines. China, I believe, I'm trying to remember exactly, they've been screwing with Filipino ships. I think they may be fishing ships. China, as I recall, China's trying to basically claim a ton of sea for its own, for economic reasons and stuff. And they've been basically scaring, maybe even ramming Philippine boats to try to basically claim Filipino waters as their own. And the U.S. has been defending the Philippines. So I haven't followed it recently, but I know that's the issue that's been going on. So, can Ukraine win if they cut off supplies? It's not great if they're cut off because Europe doesn't have the amount of weapons America does. The U.S. can provide far more supplies than the Europeans can. The thing is, however, thank you, Marcia, Ukraine could get nastier. I mean, Ukraine could resort to terrorism. They could do a lot of things they're not doing right now if they felt desperate enough. But I think overall, it would be very bad for Ukraine if the U.S. cuts them off because Europe will not be able to provide enough weapons. Are Sweden and Finland in danger? I mean, no, not really, because you're members of NATO now. Even if Trump, I do not trust Trump to defend any NATO allies. I do trust the Brits, right? I trust the French. I trust the Norwegians, right? I trust the Poles, the Baltic countries. I trust a lot of Italy. I think most of Europe will go to war to defend Sweden and Finland if the Russians were to attack. America under Biden would. America under Trump, who knows? But Russia would still be in real trouble if they went to war against Europe. Hell, the Finns, Finland on its own, right? They destroyed, for 3 years, the Finns destroyed the Russians in World War II, or during World War II. As the Finns like to say, there are hundreds of thousands of Russian bodies still under the snow. So Russia taking on all of Europe would not be, again, it'd be dangerous for Europe, but it would be really dangerous for Russia too. Is Canada in NATO? Yes, Canada is a proud member of NATO, John. Yep. I should have said Canada too. Canada would help as well. Do I think Russia would actually fire? Fire in terms of what? You mean fire? What do you mean? You mean fire nuclear weapons or something? Or what do you mean, I guess? And Poland, yes. Poland is just waiting to be unleashed. This is true. Poland is like the proverbial dog that's just waiting to go after Russia. Oh, nuclear weapons. Look, Russia will never use nuclear weapons against us. Thank you, Marsha. Thank you, Susan. Because we've got nukes. They use them against us, we'll respond. They'll be gone. The one thing, and I always tell people this, but the one thing you've got to remember about Russia and nuclear weapons is there is no scenario in which Russia can attack America with nukes and hit us first so that we can't respond. We can always respond. Forget about the fact that we've got nuclear weapons on planes. We've got nuclear weapons in the ground that are very hard to destroy. Thank you, Lucy. But our nuclear missiles that are the hardest to destroy, thank you, Susan, for the gift, are in submarines. We've got a dozen, 14, I don't know what, nuclear submarines or submarines that are nuclear armed, and Russia can't hit them. They're impossible to find. So even if Russia were to surprise us and wipe out let's say they wiped out all of America, which would be horrible, right? Our nuclear submarines would still respond and wipe out all of Russia. That is called mutually assured destruction, and it is a guarantee to keep the peace. It's what's kept the peace between Russia and America for the last 70 years, that there have been no nuclear wars. Thank you. Who's the hands there? Thank you. Who's that? Dorcas. Was that? Oh, no, Dorcasaurus followed me. Chazak with the hands. So I do not believe Russia would use nukes against us because they know we would respond in kind. That would be stupid. Whether Russia would use nukes in Ukraine, that gets a little more interesting. That gets a little more interesting. Russia would hope here a couple issues here. One, first of all, why would Russia use nukes in Ukraine is the first discussion. Most of the military experts would tell you there's really no military reason why Russia would use nukes in Ukraine. It doesn't get them anything. First of all, Russia claims the land as Russia, so they'd be nuking their own land. That'd be weird. Militarily, it doesn't help them win the war. It would freak the Ukrainians out, sure. But from a military perspective, it's not clear it actually helps the Russians. It doesn't end the war any quicker. It would freak out the West. Yeah. Even worse for Russia. We're talking about Russia using nukes in Ukraine, not against NATO, right? Even worse for Russia. China. The conventional wisdom is that China and India would turn on Russia and cut them off. India is a huge economic partner helping Russia in its war effort by sustaining Russia's economy. China is helping in the war effort more directly. China is Russia's biggest patron. China is responsible in many parts or many ways for the North Koreans fighting in Ukraine. They wouldn't be there without China's approval. Many of the experts think that if Russia were to use a nuclear weapon, China would say, that's it, no more. They would write off the Russians. That would be very bad for Russia. Then comes NATO. And what would NATO do? I was quoting today a former British defense secretary, I think he was, a defense official, who said he thinks NATO would respond by attacking Russian troops in Ukraine directly if they used a nuke. Whether the Americans would do, whether Joe Biden would do that, I don't know. Donald Trump, thank you, Russell, for the fireworks. Whether Trump would do it, I really don't know. The Brits, I think, would. I think the Europeans, I think Russia uses a nuke in Ukraine, and you've got a very strong possibility of European countries declaring war on Russia. That's the danger of what happens next. Now, the only way to guarantee that Russia doesn't use nukes in Ukraine is to have a credible threat to the Russians that we will enter the war if they use the nukes. The question, therefore, becomes, do the Russians believe it? Now, I think the Brits would. Would the Americans under Biden? Would the Americans under Trump? Right? I think Macron in France would. Carol just said, I agree. So I think you would have the beginnings of a real world war if the Russians were to use nuclear weapons. And again, keep in mind, this is again where things get interesting. The only people more afraid of war with Russia and NATO than NATO is Russia. The Russians would lose war with us. If we went to war with the Russians, they'd lose. Thank you, Jay Shea. It would be bad, right? I mean, a lot of people would die on both sides. It would be very bad if we went to war with Russia, but we would win in the end. And the Russians know it. Doesn't help them. It just doesn't help the Russians to go to war with us. Or, as William just said, no one survives a nuclear war. A nuclear war, even less sense. Russia knows that no one survives a nuclear war. So why would Russia start a nuclear war? They know they'd lose. It makes no sense. And I think, I told you guys this yesterday, I've said it before, I think the Russians are actually very logical. I think the Russians are very rational. I think the Russians want you to think they're crazy. Putin wants you to think he's crazy. Oh my God, he could do anything. He could use his nukes. If you think he's crazy, and he's not, if you think he's crazy, then you worry, oh my God, well, Putin could use nukes, right? He wants you to think that. I don't think he's crazy. I don't think he's mad at all. I don't think Kim in North Korea is mad. Thank you, Danan. Thank you, Russell. Kim in North Korea, the dictator of North Korea, is crazy. Putin's not crazy. Putin, I think, is quite rational. Why poke the bear, Carla? Why not poke the bear? I would ask you. Why not? That's a cute expression, but what does that mean? I mean, Are you poking the bear when you arrest a mafia boss? I guess so. Were we poking the bear when we stopped Germany in World War II? Yeah. Were we poking the bear when we stopped the Japanese in World War II? Yeah. Were we poking the bear when we stopped Saddam Hussein from occupying and wiping out Kuwait? Yeah. I mean, people say that about Russia, like Russia has a get out of jail free card or something, right? Like, oh, you never want to confront the Russians when they do bad things. Why is that? Actually, I like what Frosted just said. Maybe we're the bear. Thank you, RTR. Maybe we're the bear, right? Russia's not the bear. Russia's the bear cub. They've got a small military. They've got a small economy. Their economy is going south. They're no longer an intellectual leader of the world. They're no longer an intellectual superpower. They're no longer an economic superpower. In some ways, they're not even a military superpower. Hey, Joey. So the Russians should be asking whether it's safe to poke this bear, the American bear, the European bear, you know? But it's something that I think the trolls, it's a Russian troll talking point. Why poke the bear? By the way, you know why you poke the bear? Because we've had 3 years of the bear threatening to do something and the bear hasn't done it in 3 years. Like the Russians threaten, and they never do anything. So that's why you poke the bear. You don't poke the bear, you stand up to the bear and you tell it no. And if you have to, you slap its hand to get it out of the cookie jar. We're going to continue the metaphor. We're underestimating Russia. Not after 3 years, we're not. Not after 3 years. It's been 3 years. The Russians have done nothing except issue threats against us. They are trying to wipe out a sovereign country. They should be stopped, period. We should be a force of good in the world. We should be standing up for the little guy. We should be standing up for countries that are our enemies and countries that publicly claim to be our enemies, which Russia does. We should be standing up to them because guess what happens? You don't stop Russia in Ukraine and there will be a war in Europe because Russia will go after Europe next. And then we are going to be at war. But again, Russia would like nothing better. And these are trolls right now that are saying this. This is part of the Russia propaganda talking points, right? Convince people that Russia is somehow special in the world, that it's okay to stop the Germans, it's okay to stop the Japanese in World War II, right? It's okay to stop Saddam Hussein from going after Kuwait. But the Russians, you never want to stop the Russians, except we did stop the Russians in Afghanistan. The Russians got their butts kicked in Afghanistan. They were destroyed. 1980s, absolutely destroyed. They lost so bad that their government collapsed and they lost their government. They lost their country, really. Thank you, Dorcas. So the bear got kicked in the 1980s. And what happened as a result? The Soviet Union dissolved and half of Europe became free. And a lot of Russian hostages became free too, like the Ukrainians, the Baltic states, a lot of others, the Georgians, still fighting for freedom in Georgia, but still, you're more free than you were. So, yeah, poke that bear. Thank you, Film. Passionate. What else we got? We should not be scared about Russia dropping a nuke. No. Thank you, Maddie. Hey, Christina. Thank you, Christina. What else, guys? What else we got? Why is Russia using North Korean troops? Because they don't have enough troops of their own. The Russians have now suffered around 700,000 casualties. Casualties in military terms do not just mean dead. It means dead and wounded. Thank you, Russell. So that's a very funny gift. Thank you, the hamster. Casualties in military terms means dead and wounded. So when you hear 700,000 casualties, it doesn't mean 700,000 troops killed. Not necessarily. Thank you, Danan. It is a cute gift. It's very goofy. But 700,000 troops killed and or wounded is huge. It's huge, right? It's absolutely huge. Russia can't afford to lose more men, so they've got the North Koreans involved. And the North Koreans are basically taking the place of Russian men because Putin is afraid of having a national call-up, a national draft because of basically the domestic tranquility. I think he's afraid of being overthrown But that's why they're using the North Koreans, because Putin is desperate for men. So, deep, deep, deep. What else we got here? Put my glasses on a second here. I mean, Ukraine's got manpower issues as well. We said, how does Ukraine have more men? I mean, also Ukraine's been having to fight as the underdog, where they're kind of, they've been on the defensive a lot. They're trying to build up their drones and other things. They've also got a lot of good weapons. But Ukraine itself, there's always been concern about whether Ukraine has enough men. Thank you, Lorraine. Everyone's getting the goofy hamster today. Thank you for that. And thank you, RTR. What else we got? Oh, what else? Have we ever come this close before with Russia? You mean to go to war? Yeah, the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were much closer at going to war with Russia in 1962. Way closer than we are now. We're not close to going to war with Russia. Relations are very bad with Russia, but the Cuban Missile Crisis, we literally almost went to war. Thank you, Rochelle, for following me. I am on Blue Sky, same name, Aravosis. But what else? Ukraine does have female soldiers. Ukraine has, thank you, Janice, for the gift, about 20%, at least as of a couple of years ago, about 20% of Ukraine's military is women, actually, which is interesting. So yes, they've always had a very strong female contingent in the military. What else? Would we steamroll Russia in war? Yes, Jaden, but war would still be very damaging and very deadly. As I always say, forget nuclear weapons. Russia uses nukes. We'll use our nukes. Russia's never using nukes. So forget nuclear weapons. Everybody loses if nukes are used, which is why nobody will use them. In a conventional war, we would destroy Russia, but it still would cause a lot of damage and a lot of people would get hurt. So no one is saying war would be easy or a good idea. It's a bad idea. But the Russians would lose, and they know they'd lose. That's another reason why, in the end, the Russians need to try to scare us into not helping Ukraine, right? Oh, we'll go to war, and you don't want to go to war. But in the end, would we win a war? Yes, the experts say. And Russia knows that, which is another reason why Russia would never go to war with us, because they're too afraid, and they're rightfully afraid. How does this war end? Cameron asks. I mean, Cameron, who knows? I mean, the problem with this war is it is kind of a stalemate. Thank you, Mike. Both sides are stuck. The Russians are stuck and the Ukrainians are stuck. Both. It's not clear how this ends. The West never wanted to give Ukraine the weapons it needed to win the war, and now it's frankly, I think, too late. I think we gave the Russians a chance to dig in, and now they've dug in. The problem becomes, how do you negotiate it? People keep saying negotiated settlement. Thank you, Yvette. But what they mean is Ukraine should just give up land. Why don't the Russians give up land, right? I mean, if you want a negotiated settlement and you want Ukraine to give up land, then why doesn't Russia give up some of its land too? Okay? Why not, right? If you don't want NATO, Ukraine to be a member of NATO, then say Russia can't be a member of the BRICS for the next 10 years. But I mean, what the Russians want, thank you, Grumpy, thank you, Danan, what the Russians want is they want to put restrictions on Ukraine and no restrictions on Russia as part of a peace deal. Russia wants to take Ukrainian land as part of the peace deal, but Russia doesn't want to lose any of their own land in the peace deal. Russia doesn't want a peace deal. Russia wants victory. That's the problem with trying to find peace. How do you find peace when Russia's the aggressor, right? I mean, this isn't a situation where they were disputing over land, right? This isn't a situation where the border was unclear and they've been fighting over a border area. No. Russia invaded because they wanted to annex Ukraine and make it Russia. How do you negotiate, right? I mean, somebody kidnaps half your family. Do you negotiate and say, well, keep my wife and I'll take one of the daughters back? I mean, right? You can't negotiate with a murderer, basically. And that's the situation the Ukrainians are in. So it's very difficult for them, you know? Anyway. What else we got? But that's a good question. MB says, how does Putin pull out without looking weak? That's a really good question. And it's a really good question. I don't know. I will say this, even though personally I don't care about whether Putin looks weak, it is true that in diplomacy, thank you, Theo, thank you, Randy, sometimes you've got to figure out how to save face. Somehow you've got to figure out how to give both parties something. So both parties feel like they got something out of it and are willing to agree, right? But that's not always the case. Thank you, Grumpy, for the gift. Thank you, Otherworld, as well. In World War II, we didn't let the Germans save face. We didn't let the Japanese or the Italians save face. We beat them, right? I mean, we don't have to let the Russians. Biden, I think, famously called it an off-ramp. We need to give the Russians an off-ramp. I don't know. Do we really? Why do we have to give Putin an off-ramp? Why don't we just beat him? I mean, at least devil's advocate, right? I mean, maybe Putin doesn't need to save face. Maybe he just needs to lose, right? We didn't let Putin save face in Afghanistan. We gave the Afghans, we gave the Mujahideen weapons, and we just let them go after the Russians for 10 years until the Russians were so decimated the Russians had to leave. We could just keep supporting the Ukrainians until the Russians are so decimated they have to leave, you know? So I'm not necessarily, I mean, it's, again, depends sort of on your point of view, but I don't necessarily think Putin needs to be, pandered to, you know? Who will replace Putin? Who knows? That's the problem. There could be somebody even worse. Thank you, Nicola, for the rose. Oh, and there was another one. It already passed off. Oh, there is Courtney. Thank you, Courtney. But you don't know who would replace Putin. It could be somebody even worse. If he's replaced at all, exactly, as Corporate Batty says. Not clear he's going to be replaced. But even if he were, what if somebody worse comes along, you know? What else? Afghanistan was attacked by the USSR, not Russia. Same thing. The Russians ran the USSR. The USSR was basically just a Russian operation under a different name. It was Russia occupying 14 other hostages. 14 other countries that Russia was holding hostage in addition to Eastern Europe. It was all Russians. Practically the entire thing was Russians. It was run by Russia. It wasn't run out of Kyiv. It wasn't run out of Vilnius. It was run out of Moscow. And, by the way, Vladimir Putin, KGB colonel. Hello, right? He had nothing to do with the USSR? Putin was literally a colonel in the KGB. He had everything to do with the USSR, right? Right? Right, DDR, all of them. Yeah, exactly, Mrs. Toad. What else? Beep, 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 beep. What else? I do not think Russia will nuke Ukraine. I think Russia would be tempted to nuke Ukraine. Let me put it this way. If we have made sufficiently clear to Russia privately that we will enter the war, and we, I mean NATO, if they use nukes, they will not use nukes. If we have not been clear to Russia what will happen, and that what will happen will be very bad, if they use nuclear weapons in Ukraine, then they might use nuclear weapons. It depends how clear we have been with Russia about the consequences. Thank you, Colin. Have a good night. Right? That's sort of the question. That's the question. Well, one of the I saw Asher just said tactical nuke. One of the things people were talking about is, again, Putin is the king at doing things halfway. Putin loves to do things that are kind of acts of war, but acts of war that are just small enough that you won't go to war over it, right? So, for example, I don't think Putin would drop a nuclear weapon on a Ukrainian city because I think we'd go to war. What if he drops a nuclear weapon over the Black Sea, right? The sea south of Ukraine. International waters, nobody gets hurt. Just to be scary, right? Are we going to go to war? No. Is it scary? Yes. Right? Again, it's all psychological warfare with him. So I think if he were to use a nuke, that's what he would do. He would blow it up like, maybe he actually, or how about this? He blows up a nuke in the sky miles above Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, which won't hurt anybody, but it will fry all the electronic equipment. The electromagnetic pulse from the explosion could destroy all the electronic equipment, all the electricity, everything in Kyiv. And now what has he done? He's used a nuke. He hasn't killed anybody. He hasn't attacked any people. He simply took out power, basically, but he used a nuclear weapon to do it in the sky, and that scares everybody. Do you go to war over Putin dropping a nuke way, way, way in the air and blowing it up where it doesn't touch people, right? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that would be classic Putin, would be something where it makes, again, Trump, forget it, because Trump, who knows how Trump thinks, right? But think about Biden. Biden would be like, well, yes, he blew up a nuke, but he didn't attack any people. No people died. I mean, he dropped it in the air over Kyiv, but it blew up a mile above Kyiv or 2 miles above Kyiv, or maybe 3 miles, whatever, right? So nobody was hurt, but it was scary and obnoxious. Do we really go to war over Russia being obnoxious, even if it's a nuclear weapon, right? But it was just obnoxious and he didn't hurt anybody. I could see even Biden going, well, that's the kind of stuff I could see Putin doing, because he excels at psychological terror. And it's all a psychological game of what he would do. No, there'd be radiation, but even the radiation, right? There'd be some radiation. Is that enough to go to war over? That's, again, these are the kind of games the Putin would play, you know? Oh, trust me, the Russians have already thought about this, Frosted. I'm not giving them any ideas. You know? Your dad helped wire the bomb in Kamchatka? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, Kamchatka, Alaska? Kamchatka was never Alaska. I wouldn't mind if it were Alaska, but I don't think so. I think Poland is basically safe. Yes, Poland's got a good military, and you're a strong member of NATO. The Russians attack you, NATO will come to defend you. Now, you're on the Russian border, though, so, I mean, more or less, right? So it's scary. I mean, if there's a war, you're right in the middle of it. So it's very scary for Poland, yes. But I still think in the end, Norway's even more safe. Yeah. Again, all of NATO, thank God for NATO, because nobody's going to touch any of you guys. Now, the only problem is they're not going to touch you directly. They're going to do stuff like the Russians probably did this weekend when they cut the internet cables in the was it the Baltic Sea? Baltic Sea, right? They're going to do stuff like that. Again, remember, I always told you, they're going to do things that are just shy of going to war. They're going to blow up. They're going to cut cables, right? I mean, well, we don't know. We think it might have been the Chinese, but I was reading that the skipper of the boat might have been Russian. And if it was the Chinese, they did it with the Russians. But we don't know. But that's the kind of thing they would do. That's the kind of thing they would do. Oh, the Irish are totally fine, please. Ireland's not even involved. Oh, I mean, the thing is, Ireland isn't a member of NATO, but you get NATO's protections anyway. You know, I do chat a lot. That's because this is a chat show. It is audio and video. I like when the trolls. That's probably my favorite troll comment. You talk a lot. Yes, it's a video show. It requires talking. I could pantomime Putin. It's like, you know. Anyway. All right. What else? What else? The Irish have potatoes, so they'll be fine. I guess so. But they have NATO, though. NATO's going to protect Ireland anyway. Ireland kind of gets away scot-free because, like, they're not a member of NATO, but they know we're going to protect them anyway. You know, France has nuclear weapons. France is fine. France is especially fine because they're NATO and they have nuclear weapons. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate that. I don't think anybody says Germany's in danger. Nobody says Germany's in danger. Is there a trusted link to donate to help Ukraine? Yes. I'm trying to think in the past, what would be, who am I thinking? Help me, guys. Is it St. Javelin? I'm trying to think of what would be an obvious donation. In the past, you could give directly to the Ukrainian government, but United 24, there you go. United 24 is like the big Ukrainian charity. Yeah. United 24. You can Google them. And they're a huge Ukrainian charity set up by the government. Very trustworthy people. So good question whether the Russian nuclear weapons even work, Bearded Axe. We don't know, but you kind of have to assume they do, right? Because what if they do work, right? You can't assume the Russian nuclear weapons don't work and say, well, right? We don't need to worry about them because their weapons don't work anyway. Well, what if they do work? That's sort of the problem with all of that. So, oops, what else? Probably clockwork. United States going to be okay? That's a whole other, I don't know. Hard to say, Anton. Anton asks, the view of the ordinary person in Russia on the war. It's a little hard to know because they're a kind of a quasi dictatorship. So if you disagree, you go to jail. Opinion polls have shown, I think, is it Levada, who's the big opinion pollster in Russia, as recently as a month ago, overwhelming number of Russians support the war. But a majority of Russians, I think, want peace. It was I'm trying to think of the exact polling numbers, but it basically showed for example, a majority of Russians wanted Putin to focus more on domestic problems, meaning the economy, right? So you get things like that where the Russians are yeah, we support the war, but we kind of wish we weren't doing it, So, but the poll numbers are very high for Putin, something like 88% or something crazy. So it's hard to say the Russian people are innocent in all of this, really. The Russians will never fire on the UK. No, because the Brits have nuclear missiles. And it would be bye-bye for Russia if they fired on the UK. They're never going to fire on the UK. Yeah. Beep, 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 beep. UK won't exist by Christmas? Well, I don't know. Unless you're all going to go up in the rapture, I think you'll be fine. EU nations would be obligated to defend Austria? Maybe. Maybe. Anyway. How many nukes does Russia have? What, 6,000 or something? Doesn't really matter, though. We've got thousands as well. It just doesn't matter how many they've got because we've got enough and they've got enough. I mean, right? They would blow us up and we blow them up, and they blow us up and we blow them up. So we do it 10 times each. We're all still gone. That's not a good thing, but it doesn't matter how many they've got. Because again, we've got enough to wipe them out if they attack us first. So no rapture just yet in the UK. Okay, Ben. Well, they said by Christmas, so you've got 5 weeks for the rapture. And Christmas would be a nice time. So I don't know. The Russian response to these missiles is going to be a couple things. I mean, basically, the British missiles, British cruise missiles, the Ukrainians used inside Russia, the American missiles. The Russians are going to blow the hell out of the Ukrainians again, like they always do. Probably tonight, they'll lob a lot of missiles and everything at Ukraine. They always do that. They're going to do more obnoxious things. It's called hybrid warfare. Stuff like cutting internet cables. Basically, the kind of things a spoiled 13-year-old boy would do is what they're going to do. But in the end, they can't go to war against us because they know they'd lose. So, Oh, what else, guys? I'm going to yawn at you. I'm sorry. Oh. Arr. I am sure about that. Pretty sure. Yep. It's quiet so far in Ukraine. Who is that? Blog na Maxim. Is that Maxim's blog, I'm guessing, is what your name is? Well, that's good. It's quiet so far, Maxim. Anyway. Anything else, guys? Otherwise, thank you, KG. Sasha is good. She is asleep in the little bed under my here, see if I can show you really quick. She's she heard us. She heard us say her name. That's okay, you. Yeah, hi. She heard me say her name. Of course, the problem is we're supposed to get rain tonight, and when it rains, Sasha freaks out. So I'm a little afraid of what's. I gave her a little sleeping pill already because she gets really freaky. China is supporting Russia already, James. The question is to what degree, if Russia went to war with us, blah, blah, blah. China has a lot to lose in a war. I mean, China economically is not in very good shape right now. They really can't afford to get into a war, an actual war with any of us. Sasha is a Yorkie Bijan. Expecting snow in Ohio. Wow. Wow. Thank you, Danon. Just joined. What's happened? Not too much. Adelina, we're just talking about Russia making threats and why nobody should care. China invading Taiwan. We talked about that earlier, Cole. There is certainly concern in the next 4 or 5 years that China could invade Taiwan. Yeah, there's certainly concern about that. Yep. Our military is still better than China's, though. I am the weatherman. I could be any man. Sometimes I'm the weatherman, I guess. Thank you, Larissa. Putin on the results of the elections in the U.S. I think the Russians are very happy that Trump got reelected. The problem with Trump is he's a bit of a wild card because Trump doesn't believe in anything. So Trump's opinions can just change on a dime. You know what I mean? But generally speaking, we know that Putin tried to get Trump elected in 2016. So I think Putin's probably pretty darn happy that Trump got elected. First of all, Trump promised to cut off all aid to Ukraine. If you're Putin, that's great, right? Biden would have kept giving aid. So, North Korea shouldn't use their nuclear weapons. No, North Korea is kind of a crazy wild card because they are crazy. North Korean government, brutal dictatorship, worst dictatorship on the planet, and they are kind of crazy. They are nuts. So, which is bad. So. Don't know what that means, walking my dog. Our economy is pretty damn good. I don't know where else you mean, Nimsy, but U.S. economy is doing great. We are the envy of the world, according to the media. North Korea is in the UN, yeah. Yep. Because the UN kind of accepts everybody, even if you're evil, right? Like, you're allowed to be evil in the UN, so North Korea would be a member, right, for now, yeah. Well, except Taiwan. Everyone got together and kicked out Taiwan because the Chinese didn't like it. So that was classic UN cowardice, that they kicked Taiwan out. What's the point of the UN? Well, don't ask me. I used to work there, so I can't tell you. I mean, the point supposedly is it gives us a place for the entire world to come together and speak, even if we are enemies. We come and we break bread together, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, I'm not convinced the UN does much. It's a bad place that spends a lot of money and doesn't do much. As I said, I used to work there. It's a horrible place. But we're not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about that. The trolls really are out lately, though. Boy, we've had a lot more interest in the show the last couple of weeks after the Trump election. Everybody's out and about. Everybody. Oh, boy. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Hey, Animo in Belgium. Salut. Or however you say it in Dutch. Or not Dutch. Is it Walloon? I keep forgetting. What's the other language for you guys? I am on Blue Sky. I am Aravosis on Blue Sky. Ethan, go check it out. I don't know what that is, walking. Duty that worn letters. I don't know what that means. Sorry. What's in it for North Korea to help Russia? Lots. North Korea is selling, I'm trying to remember which way this goes. They're selling weapons to Russia and getting money. They're buying oil from Russia, I believe, which they can't get otherwise because there are a lot of sanctions on North Korea. We believe the Russians may be helping them with their satellite technology, which helps them better develop their nuclear weapons. So there's been a lot of concern about a lot of different things the Russians may be doing to help the North Korea, and drones now. The North Koreans are building drones, a drone army that looks exactly like the Russian drone army. What a coincidence. So there's a lot of concern that the Russians are helping the North Koreans build up their military, get money they need, and also build better nuclear weapons, basically, which is really scary because the North Korean government is crazy. So it's very scary. Yeah, Serbia doesn't like us, but you were very bad people back then. So unfortunately, you kind of got what you deserved in 1999. You know, don't commit genocide. Very bad. Ethnic cleansing, very bad. So, you know. That's right. That Russian chef was killed in Serbia as well. That's true. That's true. We're getting close to closing time here, guys. We've been an hour and 27 minutes. What else here? I'm not seeing any sort of new or interesting questions here. Sorry, guys. Do follow me. You know, I always forget to. Thank you for following me, Rev and User. I never ask people to follow me. You know, let's do Discord tomorrow, Sobo. I prefer to do Discord like an hour into the show, an hour and a half into the show. I'm already kind of straining my voice a lot, so I'd rather not start Discord now. But we should think about that tomorrow. Try to remind me maybe around, you know, an hour into the show we could do Discord. That would work. Thank you, Bassface or Bassface. Oh, I guess it's Bassface. That's true. Bass. Bass like the fish. That's very funny. Bassface. It's like Bassface. That's funny. UK is not going to be hit by anybody. The Russians are never going to dare touch the UK. The Russians hate the UK. I mean, don't get me wrong, but they're terrified of you. So, and again, Britain's a member of NATO. Russia's not going to touch you. Britain has nuclear weapons. Russia's not going to touch you. So there. Because Britain's a NATO member, and they'd go to war with all of us if they did. Secondly, the Brits have nuclear weapons. So, I mean, Russia could hit them conventionally, but then they're going to go to war with all of Europe and America and Canada. So, you know, and the Australians, I'm sure, would join in for good measure as well. So, all right. Maybe we should end this one. I don't know why. Thank you, R19. Thank you, Randy. The Russian government hates the Brits, just hates them. And it's really funny to watch. And I've never fully understood it. Some people say it goes back to the Crimean War in the 1800s or something crazy. But the Russians the Brits annoy them. And I think honestly, it's to some degree, it's envy, right? I mean, Britain, well, I don't know where the British economy is versus the Russian economy. Alexa, what is the size of the British economy versus the Russian economy?
From telegraph.co.uk. The Russian economy isn't in the world top 10 largest. On IMF figures, it sits between Canada and Mexico in size, and is only just over half the size of the UK's.
Oh, Russian economy is half the size of the UK. Ha! Oh, that's good. That's good. Right. So the Brits have twice as big of an economy. The Brits have culture that's spread around the world. The Russians don't, right? The Brits today still, of course, the language. I mean, America is the reason the world speaks English, but Britain is the reason America speaks English. So it really is America and Britain who are the responsible, right? So the Brits get the international language. The Brits have an economy twice the size of Russia. The Brits have a culture that still is looked up to around the world and has influence. British music, my God, right? How often do you hear about Russian music? So on multiple levels, they're jealous of the Brits. I don't know what it is. There's something visceral about the Russians and their hatred of the Brits, and I've never understood what it is, though. I mean, I'm still to this day can't quite figure out. We've got to talk to sort of our Russian experts at some point about this. They hate the Brits. I wonder, honestly, the way the Russians act towards Britain almost makes me think of like an unrequited lover, a spurned lover, right? Like the Russians think the Brits should be their friend, and because the Brits aren't, hey, Lorraine in Wales, because the Brits aren't their friend, it's like, you know, like you like a girl and she doesn't like you, so you're like, I hate her, right? What do you mean she won't go out with me? I won't go out with her. So it's almost like Russia is like, you know, because the Brits won't go out with them. I never liked Britain. She's horrible. Yeah, it just feels that way to me. It's literally the kind of anger you see in somebody who's like has a crush on you and you don't respond, and they end up just being really mean. There is something almost irrational about the way the Russians hate the Brits. And it is. They're pissed at them. They're just pissed at them. But I do think it's they think they're equals, and the Brits don't, or they think the Brits should have been their natural ally, and they're not. Thank you, Andre. I appreciate that. But I don't quite get what it is. I really don't. I'm fascinated by the whole thing. Do wonder about that, though. Hey, Terrell. It's clearly love-hate, but I think it's because they admire the Brits. I think they really look up to the Brits, and the fact that the Brits don't really like them, I think really hurts them. Yeah. Anyway. All right, guys, I'm going to go. It's been over an hour and a half. Thank you for joining us. Remember, we've got our very cool auction of very cool stuff, including a Russian drone that I am auctioning off that was knocked down over Ukraine. We've got, I've actually got a Russian backpack from Ukraine too that we're auctioning off. I've got cool Ukrainian art. I've got a cool Ukrainian fake Lego, a Chinese Lego knockoff of U.S. military, or not just U.S., but military weapons in Ukraine, from HIMARS to Bayraktar. It's a Lego set built in China for the Ukrainians. We're auctioning that off. I've got a White House Christmas ornament, a really cool Ukrainian T-shirt, lots of different stuff. Okay, thank you, Walk-In. I'll check out my DMs. So go check out our auctions over on Discord. And otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow. All right, I'll be back every night, Monday to Friday. 6 o'clock Eastern, I do my show, and we talk about the latest from Ukraine. We also talk about Trump and all that crazy stuff. There wasn't too much crazy Trump stuff tonight. So, Kalovradi, Kesis, or Kesi, I should say. Kesis. But anyway, guys, have a good night, okay? Don't worry in the UK. You're totally safe in the UK. You're safer than most in the UK, actually. I would never even begin to worry if I were in the UK. You are one of the strongest countries out there. You've got nukes, and you've got NATO, and you've got America. Even as bad as Trump is, the UK is still our number one friend. So even Trump would defend the UK. So, all right, guys, have a good night. Boom. And you all